Let's break down Donald Trump's proposed economic agenda. We're going to take a look at the 5 areas that Trump is most focused on: taxes, trade and tariffs, corporate deregulation, energy production, and government spending. A lot of people, even Harris voters, think that Trump would be better on the economy. Let's see if they're right. We're going to start with taxes, and the first thing we're going to talk about is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which was the signature piece of economic legislation that Trump passed when he was president. It lowered taxes for all people, it lowered taxes on corporations from 35% to 21%, and overall, it cost $2 trillion. Trump is looking to make these tax cuts permanent. Right now, they're set to expire in 2025. Trump's argument was, yeah, we're going to have a $2 trillion deficit, but we're going to make up for it with economic growth and people having more money in their pockets, going to stimulate the economy, so it's going to pay for itself. But is that true? The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center took a look at it and pretty much arrived at this, which is essentially the pandemic screwed up our ability to analyze it, but in the years before the pandemic, there was no evidence to show that this was actually working, and in the end, it's just going to give a $2 trillion deficit while putting a marginal amount of money back in the pockets of regular people. This chart from the Tax Policy Center is the best possible way to show that this is really built for the upper 1% and not for you. So 2018, that's this blue bar, everybody's making more money. The year after it passes, it's designed to have a short-term benefit where I go, look at all this money in my pocket. But as 2025 rolls around, the orange bar starts to diminish for poorer people here. Wealthier people still seeing more, but take a look at this yellow bar. 2027. Where'd all your money go? Gone. It's right here. Inequality. That's what this builds. In fact, Yale did a study and found the exact same thing, which is at the very bottom here. You see 78% of gains flow to the top 10% of income distribution. And overall, yes, it improves efficiency, but really exacerbates inequality. So if you're not one of the lucky folks that lives over here in the top 1%, this ain't for you. Next is no taxes on tips. And when you look at the analysis of this, the real interesting thing is that most people who actually work in these service positions don't make enough to be federally taxed, and the ones that do are likely to get fucked in the long run because this whole thing is meant to distract from raising the minimum wage, which would affect these folks more than not taxing their tips. So the verdict on taxes, it doesn't look great unless you're very wealthy. The next section is trade, and more specifically, tariffs. Donald Trump has distinct tariff policies that would fundamentally change how we do business with our global partners. But first, let's explain tariffs, because I don't think people understand. I think most people think that tariffs are paid for by the other country, but they're not. Tariffs are paid for by the US company that's taking the import in. So for example, if I'm a car company and I have a car coming in from Japan, I'm paying the tariff on that import, not the Japanese company. So let's just get that straight. This is a tax on American companies. And just fundamentally, what tariffs do is raise prices, because when you have somebody charging you 10% just to get the car into the country, the company's not going to eat that 10%. They're going to charge it to you. You're going to pay that in increased costs, aka inflation. The first thing to look at is Trump's 10% tariff on all imported goods. And let's just reframe this as what it actually is. It's a big tax increase on you. The Tax Foundation looked into this, and essentially it equates to a $300 billion tax hike that would be passed on to you. So this tax cut that you're getting in the front end, essentially think of it like this. Trump is getting in your front door as a salesman saying, I'm going to give you lower taxes, while his buddies are going in the back door and ransacking you. And if you don't like Biden's proposed tax increases, guess what? This one rivals the ones proposed by Biden. It's more. In fact, a conservative think tank, American Action Forum, looked into this, and they found that it would cost your family up to $2,350 a year just for this one tariff proposal. And the Tax Foundation found that it would reduce the size of the US economy by 0.7%, which is a large number. It sounds small, but it's very large. Let's just say the average increase per year is 2%. So a decrease for 0.7% is massive. And it would kill 500,000 jobs. Trump's next tariff proposal is a 60% tariff on all Chinese imports, and I don't think I need to explain how stupid that is, but I will. Let's just use basic logic here. We get a tremendous amount of products imported to the US from China. This estimates that we would lose 85% of those imports, and we'd have to replace them with American jobs. And on the surface, that sounds great, right? Wrong. We have labor standards in this country which make the cost of labor dramatically higher than the cost of labor in China, where unfortunately they're using child labor and slave labor and those are the things that make it cheap. So in the end, the cost of those goods will be exponentially higher. And if you're not lucky enough to be one of the people who gets a job in that system, you are going to be screwed. And this shows that we'll actually end up losing revenue from this, not gaining it. Trump's next big thing is corporate deregulation. He says he's going to go in and make sure that there's not a bunch of regulations trying to stifle business and everybody can grow and go forward and do what they want. But that comes with significant risk. Remember the 2008 financial crisis? That's because there was no regulation in these financial markets, and they essentially just took advantage of that and drove the economy into the ground through greed, essentially. Essentially, he's saying, don't worry, trust the corporations. They're going to do a great job. And I think most of us can agree we don't trust corporations very much. Now, I'm going to keep this really slim because there's just no evidence in this area. Trump said that during his first term, when he was cutting regulations, it saved the average family $3,000 a year. There is no independent research to back that up. It's just a claim that he and his people made that they never provided evidence for. Everything I looked into, I couldn't find it. The only study I could really find was from Brookings, and it just essentially said, yeah, no, everything Trump is saying, we can't back it up either. Next is energy production, and more specifically, we're going to talk about how Trump's narrative is that Biden stopped producing domestic oil, and that's what raised the price of gas. Now, nobody's going to argue the price of gas is higher now. It is. I mean, right there where we are right now, it's $3.30 on average. When Trump was president, it was significantly lower. But Trump's narrative is Biden stopped producing US oil. I'm going to bring it back. That's my plan of how we're going to lower gas prices. But that is wrong. It's wrong because this is a chart of US domestic oil production, and that is Joe Biden producing more oil than Donald Trump ever did. So, why are gas prices not lower? It's because more domestic oil production does not equal lower gas prices. Gas prices are set by OPEC and production and supply and demand and wars in other countries. All kinds of different factors play into this. Just simply producing more oil isn't going to do it because we already do it and it's not working. So my verdict on this approach from Donald Trump and trying to lower prices at the pump, he's just wrong. And the last section is government spending. Trump really wants to reduce government spending and he has a plan to do it, but it's going to cost a shit ton. And I found a chart that is just absolutely perfect at comparing what Trump wants to do and what Harris wants to do and showing you that Trump's is way more expensive and less efficient. Let's break down Trump's first because as you can see, his is way more expensive than hers. So $3.4 trillion added to the deficit to extend those individual tax cuts that, as you saw, largely benefit the upper 10%, with a massive chunk of that going to the upper 1%. Then you have eliminating taxes on Social Security. That can help some seniors, but it's going to do $1.2 trillion worth of damage to our deficit. Then all of this is essentially corporate taxes, bringing his total deficit to $5.8 trillion. And here is Harris's proposal. $1.7 trillion to expand the child tax credit, a bigger tax credit for newborns, expanding the earned income tax credit, money back in your pocket, getting more health insurance credits, and then down payment support for housing. And all of this, with raising the corporate tax rate 7%, will reduce $1.1 trillion on that to a $1.2 trillion addition to the deficit. That is a $4.6 trillion difference between their two plans. So in the end, Trump is advocating for massively increased amounts of government spending, with really only putting money in the pocket of the upper echelon of wealthy people in this country and corporations, whereas Harris is more focused on smaller income individuals and getting them the money they need right now through clear tax credits. And it's 4 times cheaper. So unless you're uber wealthy and you want to keep being wealthy, Trump is not your guy. Trump is trying to come in the front door and sell you something and come in the back door and steal your shit. If you're poor or in the middle class, he is not out for you. These policies and these numbers show you that he is in it for corporations, he's in it for wealthy people. His numbers do not add up.